On this episode of Narcissist Apocalypse, we talk with an abuse survivor named Agatha. And Agatha was married to a goalpost-moving abuser. It's a story of people-pleasing, control disguised as love, family enmeshment, the fog, and financial abuse. Welcome to Narcissist Apocalypse, everyone. I am Brandon Chadwick, and with me today we have Agatha. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, thank you for being here today. And if you want to be a guest like Agatha is today, please do go to our website at narcissistapocalypse.com and click on the guest form button at the top of the page. There you can read all of our instructions, and please read them all and either send us an email at narcissistapocalypse@gmail.com or fill out the guest form and press the submit button. And please do send it in the format that we ask for. And there is a content warning for today's survivor story for today's episode, as we do discuss sexual abuse in this episode. So that is your content warning for today. And today you're going to hear Agatha's story, and Agatha was married to a controlling abuser, and this is a frog in the boiling pot type of story. And once you're in a relationship for a while, it's too late, and you are just surviving as best you can. So a big thank you to Agatha for being here. And now I'm going to get out of my way and your way. Agatha, the floor is now yours.
Starting way back in my childhood, I've had a very strained relationship with my mother. And I realize with perspective now, she trained me very well to be a people pleaser. Nothing I did was good enough. I had an older sister who was the golden child and could do literally no wrong. Anytime anything I did was like so blown out of proportion, and the golden child would include themselves in yelling at me along with my mom, and it made me feel obviously ganged up on, but I was obviously like there was no value to me as a child, and I feel like I carried that through my adult life. I never felt worthy to have like boyfriends or a lot of close friends. It was hard, and I always felt alone. As I got older into my teen years, I was basically invisible to my mother, and that caused me to act out in sort of off-putting ways. Like I would sleep with a lot of people, not a lot, that sounds awful, but I used sex as a way to get attention from people who I didn't really need that attention, but I didn't want anyone to be close. Same time, I wanted some sort of affection. So that was me up until my 20s. When I was 25, I met my ex at a barbecue. It was a friend of a friend's. He was a stranger. I was literally the only person I really knew there. It was sort of a random sort of situation. He didn't say any words to me. However, the next day, the friend who had invited me had kept going on and on that, he really thought I was cute and he wanted to get to know me. And every chance he could, the sort of mutual friend that we had would try to put us together in a room. And eventually we ended up one night going to another party, and he kissed me. And it was different and it was lovely, but I couldn't get over thinking that he was too nice. Like he was too nice for me to date. And it's not someone that I was like, going to be interested in. And then I happened to be in line at to go to the bathroom, as girls always are. And one of the, because I'd had a few drinks just talking to some random stranger, she's like, give the nice guy a chance. And so I thought, you know what, I'm going to give the nice guy a chance. And immediately love bombing. We dated 3 weeks before, we were saying I love yous. And it was really, to be honest, wonderful. Like it was dreamer like relationship. He was thoughtful and kind and opened the door every time I got in and out of the car. He, would bring stuff that, I'd mentioned, like just random little things. And we dated for years and literally never really had a fight. I had a couple of girlfriends, think that he was a little possessive, but I just assumed that was his way of sort of caring. That was how he, liked me knowing that he felt that, I was his. And it was a comforting feeling.
Can you give me an example of why they thought he was possessive?
If I left the house to go do anything with my friends, it would be text and text and text and text and text and like phone calls about like weird little things. And my one girlfriend was like, "Can you just tell him we're having dinner?" And it's like, but I knew, again, like this is where like I should have been more aware of red flags. That if I didn't answer the phone and didn't answer these messages, because I had seen bits of his temper to other people, never to myself. And I was like, I'm not going to get on that side of things. And I just wanted him to know that, yes, I'm with my friends, but it was still super important that he knew he was still the top of my list sort of, thing. Whenever I would have girlfriends over, because I lived alone at this point, and he would call and have to be on the phone with me while they were there. And that got annoying. And I mean, I'm just telling you this now, it's like ridiculous. Like, why would you pick up the phone? Like, why wouldn't you just enjoy the time with your girlfriend? But it just sort of became how he thought he would like, or how I thought he was showing me that he cared, if that makes any sense. One night I went out with a bunch of girls. We went to a concert and I was sleeping over at my friend's house because it was going to be late and she lived much closer to work. And he was furious. Actually, okay, this was a fight, I guess, because he was just so, well, why can't you go home? Why can't you go home? And I'm like, well, why would I when the concert's going to be over at 2? I'd have to get up at 5:30 to get back to work. Like, I might as well sleep anyways. And it took a few days for him to not calm down, but like kind of let it go. And then after that, I never stayed over at at a friend's house again, because it just wasn't worth it. Like, it was just outside the scope of necessary. And again, you take perspective with a lot of these things, and it's confusing that you put up with it, and it's sad that you put up with it, but you did. And again, it was really good training for him for later on to make sure that I was going to be well behaved for him, I guess, and be who he expected me to be. We, again, that other than that I can think of, like, we were best friends. We did lots of things together. We had lots of fun. We did activities. There was always, something going on.
So it's fair to say here in this first 3 years that you have already, based upon watching his behavior and the way he reacts to things, that you are self-regulating yourself already. There's an isolation in a way going on of you're complying to these things. You're seeing it as love, and you're seeing it in the sense of, he cares about me. This is why he's doing these things. But there's also this thing in you that is noticing his reactions and complying, and then making sure those things don't happen again. So yes, there is a first 3 years of calm, but you're complying the whole entire time.
Yes, I made our relationship easy because that's what he wanted. I made sure, like, again, with perspective looking and what you're saying, yes, like I did. But I also think that was part of the training that my mother had put into me also, right? Because it was, you don't deserve love, so how you need to earn it. and you have to show it, and you have to, you know, not complain about things, because then you're not going to have the love, right? So that's, yes, that was 100% how I got into this mess.
You made yourself small so they could be who they are.
Yes. Yes. And in the duration of our relationship, like into our marriage and everything, I normalized him constantly to people. Anybody who had like any sort of like, oh, well, that was kind of weird, I'd be like, oh, well, he had a bad day, or he had this or whatever. And I became very um, good at making excuses, and sort of also like making sure that like topics were avoided and conversations were led in a way that he was going to feel good and happy. And I was really serving him and ignoring and losing myself, like during the entire relationship.
So in this first 3 years, can you give us a kind of a 3D picture of who he is, what he wants in life? What does he want the world to see about him? Does he have shortcomings in his mind that he wants to protect? Like, what is his deal?
So he wants to be seen as perfect, like absolutely perfect. He had, you know, envisioned a perfect house and a perfect wife and perfect children, perfect dog, a perfect lawn. Everything on the outside had to look particularly perfect. He was raised in a way that his family idolized him. Like he could do no wrong. There were no shortcomings to be, as far as he was aware of himself, that he would portray. I'm like, to this day, I don't think he believes he's ever done wrong to anybody or anything. He has very black and white views of things. There's no gray areas at all. And whatever he thinks is right is 100% right. And everybody in his like inner circle, and that being his family for the most part, not only agrees, but encourages him to do these insane things. He literally, there was nothing he could do that was wrong. Him and his mother had, I believe the word is enmeshment. The relationship they had, it was very, very odd, and hard to watch in a lot of ways. And I kept thinking again, like, you know, his father was pretty absent, so he had to, you know, make it up to his mom. And that's really how the role he sort of took on. And his mother looked at him like her best friend, and like almost like a, I want to say like a husband, because he was really, you know, in charge of like helping her raise the kids and looking after the house. And yeah, he was really, and I'm using this word very facetiously, perfect, like 100% perfect. And he wanted his life to come across to every stranger out there as perfect. It was, again, like for most part, people would find him calm, um, not charming. He wasn't a charming guy. Like he wasn't that guy, but he was very calm and reasonable and always unbelievably helpful to everybody, like any stranger on the street. If he could do a favor for them, he was all over it. And again, I think that that just brings it back to what he wanted people to think about him. And part of, I think, where the isolation started to come in, and where he started to cut me off from my friends and my family, was so that they wouldn't see who he really was, and that I wouldn't have an opportunity to talk about who he really was. He really just wanted this little perfect bubble of him, his family. And when I say his family, I do not include myself in that. Like he wanted his, like his siblings and his parents, you know, counted as first and foremost for him, and then our children, and then me down the line, but only as an accessory that helped him look like he had it all together.
So eventually you do get engaged. So what happens from here?
literally the day after we got engaged, he started getting mad at me for everything. Like everything. Like I had talked for years about wanting to get married at a certain place, have like a very small, intimate outdoor wedding. And he absolutely, like, again, as soon as that ring went on, he all of a sudden like, absolutely not. That's not what we're going to do. We're going to have a giant wedding. We're going to have this. We're having it in a church. And neither of us went to like church, to be clear, like no religious aspects to our lives at all. But all of a sudden, the church is like literally the most important thing in his world. And it was what I found. It was mostly important to his mother. His mother really wanted to have this giant church wedding because, again, it went with the picture of perfect. Like we had it just all perfect. Everything had to be the way they wanted. He wanted to pick my wedding dress out because he was very afraid that I would pick something that he wouldn't like and it would ruin our wedding. And my mother ended up saying to him, under no circumstances was he going to be coming to try on dresses. And he sulked about that for weeks. Like he was really, really upset. And then it got to the point where it was just my mom and I who went. So I lost that whole experience of like having, anybody tell me I looked pretty in this dress that I had picked. We just kept going through the motions and I kept thinking to myself, okay, well, it's the stress of getting married. It's the stress of getting married. It's the stress of getting married. Once we get through this wedding, everything will go back to our normal life, which was happy enough for me. And the closer we got to the wedding, the worse his temper was. He was getting very angry at like any sort of thing. I was not allowed to argue at this point about anything. His mother was bossing me around. She was being like unbelievably cruel also. It was a lot. Like, and I had gone up to my mom and dad's house, sat down on the couch up there. This is about 2 weeks before the wedding, and just cried. And my mother actually said to me, she's like, we don't have to do this. We can call this off. And again, with perspective, I can't tell you how much I respect people who call weddings off because I think that that is the bravest thing in the world. And I wish I'd had some amount of that bravery because I was just like, I can't tell like 400 people that we're not doing this anymore. I can't say I'm not wearing that dress. I just couldn't face that aspect of it. And again, I was still holding on to like the hope that it was just going to go back to normal and everything was going to be okay once we just got through this wedding. As soon as the wedding was done, we were going to go back to being friends and everything was going to be okay because the stresses of the wedding was going to be gone. And for a week after the wedding, it was actually amazing. We had a really, like, it was great. There was a lot of family around and we had a great time. And then we went on our honeymoon, had a beautiful time, came back from that. And within 12 hours of, landing back in, it just started up again. And it was just everything I did was wrong. And everything was, I couldn't do this. I couldn't do that. During, like, just after we got married, I actually got a huge promotion at work. He was so mad at me. So mad because I, at that point, was making almost as much money as him. And he was furious to the point of like not even being able to like look me in the eye when I told him this like amazing news. And I thought to myself, like, how can you not be happy? Like, this is helping us, our lives, right? Like, this is a lot of extra money. And again, with perspective, it's because he felt threatened by that. And he was definitely not going to see it as a win for me. He saw it as a loss for himself because he was supposed to be the breadwinner. He was supposed to be the man of the family. And if I was at all more successful than him, that would illustrate somehow that he was a failure.
What other things were going on that he was getting mad about?
Anytime I wanted to visit my parents, it was 100% no. We weren't allowed to do that at all. Once every couple of months, I guess when I say a couple, like twice a year, we would go visit them. He started to limit my phone calls with them. At this point, we were still not into our home, our matrimonial home. the night that we were moving into our matrimonial home, his mother pulled him aside and told him that it's all fine and good that he got married, but his first family was them, and that was his first responsibility. So again, in my dream of dreams, I thought, okay, when we move into our home, everything's going to go back to normal. And we moved into the house, and he never came home. Like, never came home. I would be sitting by myself up until like 9, 10 o'clock at night, like dinner on the table situation, because that was something that he had laid out that was expected. And he just wouldn't come home. And I couldn't understand it. And then I was like, what are you doing? And sometimes he'd say, oh, I was working late or this. But as I found out through his siblings, that he was at his parents' house, just laying on the couch, having a nap, waiting for someone to come home, just to put in time there to show that he was still part of that family and that family was more important. And then he would come back, like come to our home and be like, expect dinner. At this point, he was very adamant about what our sex life should look like. And I assure you, when you are being ignored like that, the last thing you want is to have any sort of intimacy with someone. Like, I just wanted it to go back to normal. And so I finally talked about it with him, because again, that took a lot of nerve, because again, I've been trained very hard to not talk about my feelings. My feelings don't matter. And this is when the silent treatment started. So the silent treatment in that instance, I believe, was about 2 weeks long. So living in a house, we just moved out of town. I have no friends. We don't know anybody in the neighborhoods. We have nothing. And I'm sitting in this house completely isolated, and he won't come home. But then when he does get home, he won't speak to me. And I would follow him around like a puppy, like trying to get him to talk about anything, like anything at all. Like, how was your day? This, like, it was so pathetic, like so pathetic. But I was begging for any sort of like, break the silence. And he would figure out in whatever way he did, that whenever my punishment was over, everything literally would just be back to normal. Like, it was just over. And that was the end of it. And I could start to tell when the silent treatments were coming, because he would get this like furrowed brow sort of look in his eye, anger, that was almost like a warning for me to not cross the line. And I mean, and we're talking about very minimal things. It's not like I was trying to like persuade him to do something. It would be, what do you think about, like, I had made chili as an example, and his job was supposed to be the dishes. And if I said to him, like, are you going to clean out the crock pot? If he did not feel like it, then that would, again, like, just initiate these days of no talking. So it started to become like, I didn't know what to do, in the sense of like, all I could try to figure out is, how do I make him happier? How do I make him happier? And I would go over and above. So then I started doing all the housework, like all the dishes, all the things, everything. And again, like, it was just, he still wasn't coming home. He was still spending all this time at his parents' house. And then he started saying that at this point, we'd been married over a year, and he wanted to have kids. And I was like, I'm 100% not having children if you can't manage to come home. Like, I'm not doing that by myself. I'm not taking that on. So his mother recommended that we go to marriage counseling. So he went first and came home that day and told me that he had met this counselor. So he picked this person out. And he had gone for the first meeting. And the way it worked was that I was going to go for my own meeting, and then we would go back together. And, she was going to try to help us. So my appointment was a couple days after that. And my first thought was, I was furious, because I was like, it took your mother to point out that something was wrong. But at the same time, I was grateful, because I thought, okay, again, now we can get back to normal. Normal's coming. If we just play this part and get through this, then everything's going to be back to normal. And I went and saw the therapist, and the therapist very much agreed that I had very much validated my feelings that he should be coming home and that he should be part of the marriage. And she was, very supportive in having a conversation. So then when we went back for the two of us in the meeting, she said, like, to him that you should start going home. We left and again, we had and in the therapist's office, he was agreeable and was like, yes, absolutely, going to do all these changes, everything. Got to the car, and it was two full weeks of him not speaking to me because I had manipulated her, and I had, basically he wasn't prepared to not come home to start coming home. So her saying that to him was just the most unbelievably egregious thing that could have happened, because again, no one has ever told this man he's wrong in any factor. So the fact that she pointed out that yes, it's time for him to start coming, and participating in the marriage, he was furious with me, like furious. So that was a really awful, like extra awful silent treatment, because he would come, when he would be home, he would be throwing things, and there would be just an absolute rage instead of just like this like blank slate that was the normal silent treatment. There was a underneath rage, and I was like, I didn't do this. I didn't make her say those things. Like, most people think you should come home. Like, after the silent treatment, there was a huge blow up, and I started to think that I should leave him at that point. And I'm going to say, like, not even a week later, everything was back to normal, and he was sweet and caring and just the person I had missed for, like, at this point, like almost 3 years. And it was wonderful. And so then when he mentioned again, like, let's start a family, I was like absolutely all in. And I got pregnant immediately. And throughout that pregnancy, he was perfect. Like, he, rub my feet at night and make sure I felt good, and, all the wonderful, like, sort of corny husband stuff that you can do for your wife when she's pregnant. And it was wonderful. Like, it was really, really wonderful. I gave birth to our first child, and he took 2 weeks off to stay home, to help me out and, be with the baby. And then he went back to work. And as soon as he went back to work, it was a new level of rage, because he was super possessive about what I did with the baby. He wouldn't, like, after the first 2 weeks, he wouldn't change a diaper if he had to. He would act, if people are around, like if we had visitors over, mostly just family, but he would make a big production about how much, he loved this child, and he would fawn over it and everything would be great. But then as soon as they left, literally throw it back in my arms. And it was very clear to me that I was going to be doing this by myself. And to be honest, I was okay with it, because I was enamored with this child. I was so happy to be a mom, and I just wanted to provide a lovely little life for this new baby. I was very, again, when you have a newborn, sleep is not your friend. And I, would get up as soon as I heard him cry and, do everything. And then one night, I guess I slept past the first couple seconds of crying, and it woke him up. The baby woke him up, and he started screaming at that child, who was like 7 weeks old. And he is screaming at the child and screaming that he needs to learn to settle down. He needed to learn to stop crying, and he needed to just stop, disrupting his sleep, basically. And then I went to get up to get the baby to try to, like, calm him down, because that's what a baby's asking for, especially at 7 weeks old. Like, that baby needs food, a diaper change, or some sort of like touch. And he wouldn't let me go to my baby because he insisted that baby was just going to learn. He was going to learn a lesson at 7 weeks old to not wake him up. And after that night, I basically slept with one eye open because anytime there was movement, a peep, anything, I made sure I grabbed that child and, just made sure that he never got disrupted sleep like ever again. And then during this time, we had two more kids like back to back. So I had 3 children under the age of 3, and I was exhausted. Like exhausted because again, it was all me for the babies. Like there was no help at all. And then on top of it, I would have to entertain and clean the house, and it was just constant work for me. But again, I love my children. The only thing that I am glad I never left him is because of those wonderful kids, because I feel like when I say those things, it's like wishing them away, and I would never do that because they are just gifts. Yeah, I love them. I was just exhausted, I guess. The youngest baby was terrible in the sense of he was super colicky and he would sleep in 20-minute increments. So aside from getting up and looking after toddlers all day long, I was getting 20 minutes of sleep here, 20 minutes of sleep there. One morning, I guess the kids were kind of being rowdy, and I lost my temper a little bit and was like, just be quiet. And I yelled because I was also trying to make sure that they were quiet enough to keep him asleep. But my yelling, I guess, woke him up. And he came downstairs and gave me this look. And it was so shameful. I've never felt as much shame as I did in that moment, that he was like, I got this. You go back to bed. Like I had failed as a parent because I had lost my temper for a second. And I didn't know how to get out of that, because how was I going to make that up to him? I had failed on such a grandiose level at this point that I didn't know what to do. And I felt just shame. The worst kind of shame. It was awful. Like, sorry, just thinking about it now, and you're just like, oh, I lost my temper for 1 second. And I feel that it wasn't outside of what anyone else might have done, but he really wanted me to feel the shame about that. And I pride myself on, like, the one good thing I've done in this world is I am a good mom. Like I am a good mom. And he always at any moment tried to take that away from me, to point out my faults and point out what I wasn't doing and how I was, what I was failing at and how I just wasn't that good at it. So it hurt a lot, like a lot. And I feel like that also threw me into a zone of just like, how do you be better? Like, how do I be better? How do I be better? And again, he would lose his temper at the kids. And this is when I started to realize that, like, his temper was corresponded with when we would have sex, unfortunately. So if it had been a few weeks and he would get testier with the kids, and the kids would just look at me and look like, save me. And I was like, I have no power here. Like, there's nothing I can do. And then I figured out that I could do this, and then we would be at peace for a couple more, we'd have a peaceful week after that. So I would have to sit there and start trying to psychologically psych myself up to just, because it was for the good of the family, which sounds awful. I'm fully aware of how disgusting that sounds, but it was a survival technique to try to keep the anger at bay, because again, it wasn't just directed at me. And when he put it on the kids, like, it was just scary, and awful, the yelling and and I didn't know how else to protect them at that point. So with having three very young children, back to back to back, it was mentioned that I should consider giving up my career and just be a stay-at-home mom, which I was excited about the idea of, to be honest, because again, I just love these children. I wanted to be with them. It did not make sense to me to have them being picked up to daycare or being looked after by his mother or any of that stuff. So I gave up my career, which quickly led to giving up my bank account and giving up credit cards and giving up any access to my own money. This, with again, perspective, trying to rebuild myself after 50 has not been easy, was part of the plan to make sure that I stayed home and I stayed behaving. He became a single income and he had a great income, just to be clear. Like it's not like it was a substantial amount of money that he made. But somehow we always ran out every month. There was too much money being spent. And because I was, again, a stay-at-home mom, which we had agreed to together, I was at fault for us not having money and not being able to buy extra things. And so every month when the Visa bill would come, he would start to yell and scream. And literally, I would buy groceries and I would coupon clip and I would do everything I could to like make sure, everything was looked after at the cheapest possible thing. And I was still getting in trouble for spending money. He, in the interim of all of this, or in the middle of all this, sorry, he is also racking up debt. Like, and I never have it. I will have any idea what he spent this money on, but on our line of credit that he had taken out against the house, hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt that I don't understand where it came from. He had stated it was because I stayed home, and this is how he had to keep the house running. But again, I knew how much we paid for a mortgage. I knew how much he made. Like, it didn't add up in my head. And again, I'll never find out what happened to that money. One night we were at dinner, and again, in another, attempt to make sure he shamed me, my phone bill, somebody had, like my cell phone bill, somebody had texted me, and there was a 50-cent charge on it. And he screamed at me in front of the kids at dinner, like over and like, and wouldn't let it drop. And I'm like, it's 50 cents. Like, but again, it was like I had just basically, starved us for the next 6 weeks. My oldest child had come after I was cleaning up dinner and was like, do you think he's going to forgive you? And I just kind of gave him a hug and I was like, oh, Dad's just kidding. He was just trying to be funny. Because again, like, how do you normalize that? And it was such a volcanic eruption and in front of the kids, again, just to show that he was the boss and I was way less than him. I had no right spending his money. And the kids, I have a fantastic relationship with my kids. The one thing that I find sort of became a little bit more obvious as they got older was that they didn't take me seriously. And I think it's because he was always making me the brunt of the jokes and shaming me, like I was just saying, or embarrassing me, or just putting me down so that they didn't feel that they could like really respect me in front of him in particular. But in general, like they it's better, since we left, but it was pretty bad. And at the same time, I understand where it was coming from with them because I did everything he said, like everything that he said, I jumped to do. So, and anything I said was just ignored. So why would they think otherwise? And I, again, it was just a terrible way to be in a marriage. Money was always a major, major issue. He, again, he was allowed to spend money on whatever he wanted. I had to basically ask for permission to buy groceries. He would come home with gifts for me that always seemed like super thoughtful, but always would have like a back end sort of shark bite to them. After I had 3 children, he had made a big point of making sure that I knew and would tell me often that he didn't marry a fat girl and he wasn't attracted to fat girls and I was going to lose the weight. And he expected me to look the way I did when we were dating, after 3 kids and after aging. And I should point out at this point, he had put on a substantial amount of weight, but I was not allowed to comment on that. So I took it to heart because, again, I'm trying so hard to please him. I started exercising a lot. I was walking, I was running, I was, doing workout videos, anything I could do. And one day I had mentioned to him that I had walked like 11 kilometers and he accused me of lying. And I'm like, why would I lie about that? Because I had an app on my phone that would track. And he says, that's not accurate. He goes, you need to use this instead. And he gave me another, his phone, basically like his burner phone or some random phone that had a different app that he wanted me to carry with me so that he could track how much I was walking. And then a couple of days after that, he came home with like a fitness watch and he was like, now you can, really track and show me what you do. And then I was super excited the first day, went out, again, I think it was 8 or 9 kilometers. And he started mocking me for that. And he was like, oh, if you just move your wrist enough, then it's going to increase your steps. So you don't really step that much. And I was like, why did you buy this for me if you're going to make fun of me for it? And then, of course, he got mad because I wasn't grateful for what he had given me. And it's just, I didn't want a gift that was going to encourage him to continue to make fun of me or give him cause to make fun of me. And that's all it ever was, is that it was like this, well, I'm so nice because I got this for you, but because I bought it for you, I can tell you how I'm going to feel about it and how and what I want you to feel about it, basically. And that was like every gift he ever gave me during the course of the entire time we were together. If I didn't make the absolute biggest fuss and love it more than anyone could ever love a gift, he would cry. He would cry, actually cry because I was so ungrateful. And so then every time there was any sort of anything, I had to put on a production. On the flip side of that, any gift I gave him, he would basically throw to the side. So nothing was ever good enough or used. I'd buy him a shirt and he'd leave the tags on and just put it in the drawer. He would just continually and again, it was just another way to demean anything that I tried to do that was nice, because it was never enough, no matter what it was. We had gone in our car, and he got in a small accident and it caused a bit of damage to the car. It was my fault because I didn't point out to him what he was about to hit. And I was just like, but you were driving. And then again, I saw the thing that he was about to hit and I had the thoughts in my head, I should tell him. And then I thought, no, if I tell him he's going to hit that, then he's going to get mad at me for that. So then he hit it and got mad at me for that anyway. So I knew I was going to lose no matter what. But instead of fixing what was my car, he bought himself a brand new car. And again, totally fine. That was his money, and he made sure I knew that was his money and that was what he was going to spend it on, because that was what he deserved. He couldn't be seen driving a piece of shit. It had to be, something big and shiny. And it was totally fine for me to drive around in this broken vehicle with the kids, because that didn't affect him at all. So it was just left that way. At that point around there, I was thinking, my youngest child was 3, and I kept just trying to say to myself, it was like a mantra, I can do 15 more years. I can do 15 more years. I can get my youngest through to 18, and then we can just kind of go our separate ways. We began to have sex less and less because the marriage, the anger, the issues, there was just so much going on that I had a lot harder time getting myself to a point where I could do it. It made me physically sick, absolutely nauseous. It was work. It was a job that I sort of I thought of it as a job. Like I just had to get through that so that I could again get through the next day. After a while, it became less sex, and he had a very stern conversation with me, and told me very blatantly that if I wasn't going to have sex with him, then he was going to stop paying the bills, because if I wasn't going to do my job, he wasn't going to do his. And in that moment, it was, and again, I had suspected all along I had no value. Don't get me wrong. This is not like new news, but it really cemented the idea that I was nothing more than something that he felt he owned. And he had every entitlement to do as he pleased, whatever way that was. And I was just to follow suit. So again, sex became more important to him and as little importance to me as possible. At this point, we were seeing another marriage counselor, and I mentioned to the marriage counselor that he had said this, that he was not going to pay the bills if I didn't have sex with him. And the marriage counselor was like, "No, you can't do that." And he sat there in the office, and he sat up. He got, taller in his chair and puffed his chest out a little bit and was like, "I absolutely can." And we never saw that marriage counselor again, just as a side note, because he, under no circumstance was he going to have someone tell him that he didn't have the right to tell me that. He felt too comfortable to put on an air to seem normal anymore. So it just got bad, like bad. In this time, we had become close with another couple, and we had gone to visit them, and it was a husband and wife, and they had a bunch of kids. We had a bunch of kids. Everybody got along. It was like my most favorite times during those very sad times, because it was always like so much laughter and everybody got along. It was so much fun. Like everybody was always so excited, and so much laughter, and so much, just such amazing times. And again, during this period where I had felt so alone for so long, it was such a great, it was just so much, it's just so great. And one day my ex had gone off to the bathroom, and the husband looked at me and looked dead in my eyes, stone face, was like, "I fucking hate that guy." And I was shocked. I'm like, "But you always, like, everything's always so, like, you guys are so great with him and everything." And the wife piped up and was like, "That's because we love you. We love you. And that's how much we love you. We just want to spend time with you. We want to spend time with your kids. We love you guys so much, but he is awful." And then the husband came back and was mentioned, not sorry, my ex, but the husband was saying that, like, "We are tired of watching him abuse you guys." Because again, he had a level of comfortability with them, because we had so much fun that he felt okay to, like, be himself some of the times. And it was not terrible stuff. And I thought to myself, if you thought that was bad, you should see what happens at home. But they started to try to empower me to get out. So he started a bank account for me, with a little bit of seed money. At this time, I was doing like odd jobs for a bit of cash. So I would give my ex a certain amount of the cash, and the other bit of the cash I would start to hoard away, with the intention of saving up for a lawyer. At this point, I knew I had to get out, but I knew I couldn't just leave. It had to be very well planned, and it had to be a surprise to him, because if he had any chance to plan for it, or I just knew how it would go bad. So from that point forward, it was about 3 years of saving money and trying to get everything I could in order to be able to get myself and my kids out. During this time, we kept going to marriage counseling because he was very unhappy. Again, we hadn't had sex for a very long time, and that was the main reason we were in marriage counseling, was so that he could find someone to tell me to have sex with him. One of the first marriage counselors that we went to had asked, to my ex, like, what do you need in a marriage to be happy? Which I think is a pretty common question. And he pulled out a list, like a handwritten list that he had written out, and there was probably 45 items on it, all of which that he needed me to do to be happy. And they were some of them were ridiculous, some of them were not. He needed me to stay up until 11 o'clock every night with him, and he needed it was just stuff that I felt like I sort of could manage through. And then the marriage counselor looked to me and said, well, what do you need? And I said, I just need him to be happy. And he was like, don't be so obtuse. What do you need? And I couldn't come up with anything. I literally couldn't think of a single thing that at that point, I still just needed him to be happy, because it was the only way for us to survive, was for us, and not be yelled at and not have all the stompy feet and the yelling and the just anger, just be happy. So I took the list. I accomplished pretty much all of it by the time we got back for our next appointment with the therapist. And lo and behold, he has a new list, because that stuff wasn't really enough. So it was a moving goalpost. So it was kind of pointed out that, like, well, you already had your list. And so then he looked back at me and he was like, well, you had to have thought of something. Like, what can you do? And I said, well, I would really like if he just asked me how my day was when he got home. Because he never would. He did not care at all. And had made so many comments as such, like, I don't care what you did during the day, but he would, I'd have to listen to the stories about his work and whatever else. And again, you feign interest because it's your partner. You're supposed to want to know what he did during the day. And he said that it was too much work to ask and that he wasn't going to do that. So at that point, the therapist looked at me and said, I think that you would benefit from some one-on-one therapy. And I have never, ever in all of our years married, engaged and anything, I had ever seen him, even at the birth of our children, as happy as he was at that statement, because he interpreted that as, see, you are the problem and you will be fixed now. He was smitten. I mean, the next few days were the most glorious days of our marriage. He was so happy. Then I went for my first one-on-one appointment. And as it turned out, the therapist was actually wanted to speak to me one-on-one because he could see I needed help. And he started to help me break down how little I felt of myself. So he started to arm me with ways to feel better about myself, ways to stop feeling like I had no value. He went through schemas with me. He went through all kinds of exercises to help me understand that I did have value and that this marriage was not going to work for me. And again, he used better words than I'm going to use now, but that marriage was killing me. So I saw this therapist for about a year. We stopped seeing him as a marriage counselor because my ex was not seeing the results that he wanted to see, in the sense of I wasn't behaving. I was not falling in line like he was expecting me to do through marriage counseling. We went through 6 more marriage counselors. all of which would eventually tell him that he had some major temper issues and that, he had to, really sort of reevaluate. And one marriage counseling session, he actually kicked the coffee table over and stormed out because he was so enraged that, like, how dare someone tell him he was a problem? And it was terrifying to me, obviously. It was terrifying, I think, to the counselor, although he didn't seem too fazed by it, but we didn't see him again after that either. So that was that. During all this time, as we're, trying to work on the marriage, I'm still trying to plan my out. I'm trying hard to figure out how I can get my kids and myself out of this marriage. I finally went to the last marriage counselor that we saw, and I had told, so we had seen this guy for a bit, and again, he was trying to tell my ex that, again, like, there were some major issues that needed to be worked on in the sense of, like, listening and being part of, like, we're supposed to be a partnership, not just like, it was supposed to be together that we were doing this, relationship and raising children and everything. And it couldn't just be his way because he said so. This marriage counselor in particular, his mother had recommended, so he didn't quit him. So that was a whole other thing. So we did see this guy for a bit of time. During this, I finally got the courage up. I hired a lawyer. He had worked late one night. I sent the kids to my parents' house. I left him a letter and I left the house. He came home and called me immediately and begged me just to talk. He said, we won't stay in the house. We'll go for a walk, which I thought was safe for me. So we met up, went for a walk, and I didn't end up leaving. We were going to work on it. We were going to try. And I regret that because I feel like I chickened out and sort of let myself down. And after that, again, everything was good for a couple of weeks. He was this unbelievably attentive listener and everything was lovely. Then he started getting out of control with his control at controlling me. So he had locked my phone down. He put a tracking device on the phone. I had to, at the end of every day, explain to him in detail where I had been and if I, and he would quiz me basically, make sure I didn't miss a step on my day. He would take the phones out of the house so that there was no landlines. Again, I couldn't dial out on my phone because it was locked. So that I couldn't call my parents and I couldn't call anybody for help. I had a friend show up at the house in the middle of the day and I was like, what are you doing here? She's like, I didn't know if you were alive because again, there was no response. I wasn't my phone, he had my phone locked down. I couldn't answer any text messages. I couldn't answer phone calls. I couldn't answer anything. And she was genuinely concerned that something had happened. And then I explained to her and she's like, you can't, that's it's abuse. Do you understand this? And I'm like, again, I had at that point known that it was an abusive marriage and there was a lot of things going on. And I was trying to get out, but it's not as easy as people think it is. And I lost a few friends over the course of a year that it took me to actually from that letter to when I left, because they got mad that I wasn't just leaving. And I just wish people would understand how hard it is to leave. It is, as much as I felt empowered at that point, I had the friends who were helping me, I had the therapist who had helped me. I still had no job and no real money and nowhere to go. My parents were trying very hard to help and be supportive, but they're, they live 6 hours away. It's not that easy to, sort of be there for me, like physically. And in all of this, his mother is following me around, telling me that I need to try harder and that, I can't give up on our marriage for our children, and that, if I was a good mother, I'd stay, and all kinds of stuff. And it was exhausting, like exhausting, exhausting. And I was trying hard to, again, like just maintain and get the courage to go. And finally, this therapist that we were seeing, I talked to him privately and I said, I need you to help me. I need you to tell him I want a divorce. And so we went for our last marriage counseling session, and he pulled me in first by myself. And he says, are you sure this is what you want? And I said, yes, but I can't do it by myself. And so he called my ex in and then very calmly said, just so you know, she would like a divorce. And he couldn't understand why, and started crying and started just like over the top crying, saying, how can you, like the same things that you would expect, like, how can I fix it? And he said, the counselor said to me, what is your biggest grievance in this marriage? And I said that I've just never been heard. And he amped up the crying, and the counselor went over to comfort him. And as he was comforting him, he kind of whispered, he goes, she's 100% right. And that snapped him out of the crying. And he was like, what do you mean? And he was like, she literally just told you her largest grievance in the marriage. And here I am comforting you. And shortly after that, we finished the session. We left. And the car ride home, which I should have taken a separate car, but hindsight's always 2020. He was like, we just have to try harder. And the next day I gave him the letter from a lawyer because I was done. I was not going to backtrack anymore. And so we started I started looking for a place to live. The lawyer was was very actively sending him letters and trying to get him to get a lawyer, which he refused. And the day that I moved out, he told me that he will bankrupt us both before giving me a penny. His mother told my mother that they will do everything they can to make sure the kids never want to be around me. And I left, and he took the kids and started immediately trying to alienate them from me. He told them that basically that because he stayed in our matrimonial home, that is their only home. It didn't matter what I, was going to bring them to. This was their only home. That they were a family now, basically trying to cut me out like I didn't exist. And one of my kids, when I brought them over to the new place for the first time, told me about the conversation he had about how, that was their only home, all the stuff that I just said. And they were like, I was actually kind of scared to come over here because I didn't know what to expect. And I was like, well, it's going to be different. Things are going to be different, but it's going to be great. And we, kind of went through the house, and everything was, and again, the kids have been very resilient. He fought hard for 50-50 custody because that's what, they do. He does not pay child support. He doesn't pay any of the expenses in regards to the kids. This is all on me. At the beginning of our separation, I found a very terrible part-time job because, again, I hadn't had a career for 15 years at that point. So I had to start life over again. I had a friend who luckily worked at a bank. She got me a credit card so that I could get some credit because, again, I didn't have anything. I didn't have a bank account in my name, nothing. And yeah, I just keep trying to rebuild. And he has used the court system as a means to financially abuse me. He, again, withholds everything he can from the kids. Anything like when I moved out, if I didn't own it before college, it didn't leave the house. So he was left with everything. Again, I started from scratch with a lot of borrowed items and things that people had donated. Yeah, and it's been almost 10 years and we're still fighting over the silliest of things.
And how has the aftermath and healing been? What has your process been?
Early on in the divorce process, we saw a mediator, and she said right out of the gate, she goes, if you both aren't interested in settling something, there's no point in me in having my services. So she's like, tell me about your marriage. So I told her variations of what I've told you. And she sent me to a domestic violence counselor. And she said that she, under no circumstance, would put the two of us in the same room because of everything that had happened and the fact that she just felt that that would be like just morally unfair to her or to me. Sorry, that it just. So I went to see someone for domestic violence, a therapist, and she introduced me to Lundy Brankoff's book. I got the book immediately after she told me to. It took me almost a year to even pick it up to read it because I was so afraid of what I was going to learn. That being said, it was one of the greatest things. I've passed it to someone else who I met recently who is leaving someone very similar to my ex. And I said, you need this ammunition. It's hard. It's a hard, terrible, awful read, but you need it because it helps understand that it's not your fault. And that has been the biggest thing that I've been trying to get through in my healing is it wasn't my fault that this happened. I have tremendous guilt that is who I picked for my kid's father. I've spent hours in therapy about that. And the therapist was like, you didn't know. And I didn't know. But that's something that, again, that's always hindsight and being blamed for everything for years. It's hard to stop blaming yourself. And I have good days and bad days still. Like I said, a very long time, but some days you just can't help but feel like just awful and as such like you failed at everything. But then you have these wonderful days where it's so much fun to laugh. And my relationship with my children is brilliant. They understand completely why we had to separate. They are happy when they're here. I always get sad when they go, obviously. I think that's normal for parents, but I just never know what they're walking into. And that, is something that they also never know either. So they've also come up with their own coping techniques. They're all in therapy right now, which is fantastic. When we first separated, we were on the terrible 2-2-3 schedule. And when he was going to be coming to pick the kids up, they would all sit around. Like, this is so weird. And we would sit on the couch or watching TV or a movie, but they all had to be touching me. Like holding my hand or like something just to get like a little extra before they went back. Then we've moved on to a week, which is good. So when they're gone, I talk to them regularly. When they come back, the first day that they're back, they decompress, and you can see them decompressing from being over with their father. Then the next day is a little less. And then by the second sleep, if you will, they're relaxed and back. Everything's good and we're good. And then you have 3 more days of good. And then they start to get wound up about having to go back over there. And as a parent, it's so hard to watch. Like, it's so hard. But I keep reading, and I hear people say all the time that they just need one healthy parent to survive. And so I'm doing my absolute best to be as healthy as I can for them so that they can make it out of this also.
And if you had any words of wisdom for everyone listening, what would they be?
Don't be so hard on yourself. You don't realize you're that frog in the boiling water until it's too late. And forgive yourself. Love yourself. And know in your gut that you're doing the right thing for yourself if you try to get out. And if it takes you 10 years to get out, it takes you 10 years to get out. That's okay. Everybody has their own timeline. And be patient and just do what you can to love yourself. I can't say that enough. I spent 3/4 of my life hating myself and thinking so little that I'm choosing now to see I'm okay.
Well, Agatha, I really want to thank you for being here with me today, sharing your story. You are someone who had this influence of your childhood, and even though that influence was there, you started off the relationship still who you were, and you lost yourself along the way in a lot of ways, only to kind of really find your way back and to stand up for yourself. And I'm happy that you had friends that pointed certain things out here to really give you, the strength you needed, another set of eyes, the therapist as well. Not a lot of people have those things, especially when you're feeling isolated with everything and you were just dealing with someone who always had to be right and do things their way and moving goalposts. And we're happy you made it through fully mentally intact as best as you could. Obviously everyone is going to have PTSD, CPTSD from experiences like this, and just dealing with someone like this for a very, very long time. But I'm happy you're free and you are here to validate a lot of people's experiences today, and you did that, and you're going to save someone's life by doing so. So a big thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you so much for all you do. Finding your podcast 2 years ago was life-changing. And again, listening to survivor stories, I hate to say it normalizes it, but it really helps not feel alone.
And you did that for someone else today. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Agatha, for being here once again. And if you want to be a guest like Agatha was today, please do go to our website at narcissistapocalypse.com and click on the guest form button at the top of the page. There you can read all of our instructions, and please read them all and either send us an email at narcissistapocalypse@gmail.com or fill out our guest form and press the submit button. And please do send it in the format that we ask for. Also, at our website, we have a support group. So if you need support, we have a support group by clicking on the support group button at narcissistapocalypse.com. Inside, you'll see that we have Zoom meetings every Wednesday night, Thursday afternoons, and Saturday nights. We have forum boards for you to post on to get the validation that you need from survivors just like you. It is a wonderful group of people on there, and you can make a lot of friends too. So if you need support, join our support group today. And if you need even more support, please do visit our friends at DomesticShelters.org. At DomesticShelters.org, they have articles and resources to help you make sense of everything that you're dealing with. And they have every phone number, email address, web address for shelters and agencies, no matter how big or small the town you're in. DomesticShelters.org has it there. So if you need extra support, please do go to DomesticShelters.org. And we have friends of the show called Shelter Movers as well. And Shelter Movers can be found at sheltermovers.com. And what they do is they help you move all of your stuff from your home into storage. And that can be your pets and livestock too. So if you're trying to get out of domestic violence and coercive control and you need help leaving the home, getting all of your stuff out of your home and into storage, sheltermovers.com can help you get all of your stuff into storage, including your pets and livestock too. They are only available in Canada and is a donor-supported charitable organization. So if you need help from them or just want to donate to them, go to sheltermovers.com. And that is it for today's episode. So for myself and Agatha, we hope you have a good night.